me the microphone.
Welcome to Kehilat Avodat Hashem. Welcome to our Shul and Torah Center. We're really proud to have this crowd tonight because we're raising awareness on how to raise our teenagers successfully.
Amen.
I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet because we do have events in this shul pretty consistently. If you're interested, please, you're welcome to sign in. It is a privilege and honor to be here, to be part of this beautiful community. My name is Leah Abramov, and I'm part of this beautiful community, including our amazing team, the Kehilat Avodat Hashem team. And we work together. We're busy moms who volunteer to create these events. And it is a privilege to be among them because we're really trying to do it for the good, to grow as a community, as the Jewish people, and as we know, it all starts with the woman. I want to thank our organizers. I want to thank Chazak for being here, Amudim, Emet, the Alliance of Bukhari in America, and Kehilat Avodat Hashem Sisterhood. Namely, Mrs. Tova Babeko, Vika Yabai, Dina Babai, Bracha Sophie, am I missing anyone? Oh yeah, they told me to say my name. We are under the direction of Rabbi Lior Dachan and his amazing Rabbanit Tahila Dachan, who's not here yet, but she'll be here, B'ezrat Hashem. We're lucky to be under her direction and guidance and growth, B'ezrat Hashem. To me personally, it is a privilege for me to introduce Dr. Tamar Perlman, who I'm privileged to have as a friend, and I'm privileged to be in her classes and in her lectures. She's a licensed clinical psychologist who's been teaching for over 10 years, primarily for the Jewish community. She practices privately in Queens, trained with Torah text and Hashkafa. Dr. Perlman also lectures on various topics, including attachment and child raising, marriage, and emotion regulation. Dr. Perlman is experienced in working with the teens at risk population, trauma therapy, somatic therapy, emotion regulation treatment. Her topic focus series given over in small groups include the enhanced marriage, mindful dating, and emotion regulation. She works primarily with women and couples, as well as young brides, giving over Kala classes in preparation for marriage. Having a degree and having experience is amazing, and I thought of Dr. Perlman as our perfect shaliach to give over this amazing information, but she's also an amazing example. As a mother who has growing children myself, raising my kids, I know that there's a delicate balance between love and discipline when it comes to raising children, raising our teenagers. And it's a very fine line, it's a very delicate balance. And you have to exercise sensitivity. You have to be careful. You want that connection. At one point, I was going through a hard time, a difficult time in my life where I was lost, where I needed answers. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent me to Dr. Perlman's lecture. She happened to speak on Shabbos, so I heard it from a friend and I said, I'm there. And the topic was how to make the right decision in life. And I was lost in this question that I had, what should I do? And it was like, you can go one way or another way. And I approached Dr. Perlman, like distraught. I said, I need your help. This is a perfect lecture. I really need your help. I'm sure she has many people coming after after her classes, asking her questions, which I'm sure will happen today. But what she did was she went the extra mile for me. The next day, she texts me saying that if you want to talk to me, I'm going to give you my time. And I didn't get Dr. Perlman's permission to say this because I had a strong feeling she'll say, no, don't say it. She's
right.
Knowing her humble nature, she's going to say, don't say this. But she was there for me. She texted me. Now I'm expecting this, like her office address, like, come talk to me. So she gives me her home address and we speak. And what I remember is that she not only she didn't really give me the answers, but she listened to me. And when she listened to me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu kind of guided me to find the answer with clarity. So this is not just a psychologist, she's a person with a big heart who practices what she preaches at home. And I'm privileged and blessed. We're privileged and blessed to have you here speak to us because of your sensitivity, your humility, and you are that example. I want to thank our sponsors for tonight. Oksana Ababai, in the Zehut to get married. May all the information that we learn and the awareness that we gain be for the merit of finding the Zivug of, please give me a loud amen, Shemuel ben Mazal, amen. Sharona Shifra bat Esther, amen. Mazal bat Eleonora. Amen. Thank you so much for listening, and without further ado, Dr. Perlman.
Thank you.
We are allowed to record today if you need to.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
I told you.
Ladies, they say that microphones are a barrier for Kol Isha sometimes. So is it okay if I don't speak with a microphone? I don't want any barriers between us. Is this okay? Yes. Okay. Leah, thank you for that beautiful introduction. Amen. I should live up to this Dr. Perlman that you're talking about. It's hard for you to hear me? No. Yes? What about now? Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm gonna go back to the microphone if you can't hear me, but I really prefer without it. Okay, raise your hand if you can't hear me as I'm speaking.
There's a seat here.
Oh, there's a seat right here, right in front of me. I'll be analyzing you the whole time. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for this event. Everyone that put it together, all the hard work that went into it, all the details, every single person involved, every minute that's engaged in community work is a minute away from personal and from family time. So thank you everyone that put it together. It should be a schut for the ladies and the men that were mentioned today to get married, Bezrat Hashem, and whoever else that needs to get married to create their families. So why are we here? Because raising children is so easy and we just want to have a coffee. So what happens to us when we talk about adolescence? Like, what's the body reaction even when we say a teenager? Palpitations, anxiety, what else? Fear. Faint. Failure. Yes.
It's also fun.
Fun.
Thank you. Yeah.
Challenge.
Yes.
I'll have a
Challenge. Hormones.
Arguments.
What? Arguments. Does this?
Lots of prayers.
What?
Lots of prayers.
Lots of prayers.
Mood swings.
Stress. So what I want to do today is I want to see, can we actually close the door? Is that okay to close the door? I just want to center us. We could talk. I got such beautiful questions. Each question was so honorable. I felt like I could spend an entire hour probably on each question. There is no way that I could give full honor and respect to this class and to each and every one of you in a wholesome way. So what I decided to do is to take the best the most useful information possible and giving over to you in the next hour about describing adolescence and then describing our approach to adolescence and what it means to us as mothers and as wives. That's the best. I'm going to try my best so that whatever I say will be useful to you in some way. There is a fascinating chazal. I just learned about this from Rabbanit Heller, who I learn a lot from. And we know this, that lifnei iver, that before a blind person, we shouldn't put a stumbling block. Now, who is responsible when your child says, Ma, I didn't do my homework because I told you we have to go to the library and the library was closed, so I didn't have the book, so I don't have to do the book report. Whose fault is that? The library's? Yours or the kids? Yours. Right, because ultimately we're responsible for our own actions. Is this true? Yes. Except, can you possibly be responsible for somebody else's actions? Yeah. Can you possibly be responsible for somebody else's downfall? If there is a person that you know is blind, and you put something in front of that person and that person falls because of what you put in front of them, whose fault is that? Yours. So you could possibly be responsible for somebody else's actions if you put something in their blind spot. You with me? Guess what's the example that's given? What? Okay, but it's the topic of tonight is the hint. Teenagers, but what with teenagers? If we do what with teenagers?
Self-esteem.
What? Self-esteem. What? Remind.
Organization.
Encourage. What? Well,
Time management.
this is what happens with adolescence. There's a crisis, and then we have to respond to the crisis. Everything with adolescence feels like a crisis. Like, oh my gosh, where's the next fire to blow out? Oh, it's not a fire. Whew, we could take a break. It was a false alarm. What's the example with the adolescent? That if a parent hits a grown child, that's the example that is given of lifnei iver. What does that mean? What does that mean?
You might cause to hit back. You're causing him.
But let's think about this in a deep way. That somehow the way that you will treat that adolescent will cause that you are responsible for that adolescent's bad behavior. Now let's understand, where is the blind spot in that adolescent? He's not blind. Why is this what the Torah tells us as the example? Where is the adolescent's blind spot?
Maturity.
So let's talk about that, emotional maturity. The Mesillat Yesharim talks about 3 things that make it hard for anybody in any situation. He uses a little bit of a different language, but I'm going to give the 3 languages that apply to adolescence. It's kina, which means jealousy. It's taiva, which means what? Desire, the bodily desire. And it's the seeking kavod. Each one of these, which is seeking respect. The Mesillat Yesharim talks about it in anger, in gava, in being too into oneself. Each one of these things is parallel to a different part of us. Kina is parallel to emotion. Taiva is parallel to body. And kavod is parallel to the moach, to the mind. Adolescence is a time where all of these 3 things are put under a test. An adolescent is going through a stressful transition that relates to kina, to taiva, and to kavod. Let's talk about how this relates to the adolescent. What does this mean to you? And what is the most important one of these 3? Why is there a time of emotional insecurity, of jealousy, of emotional immaturity? What's going on with the adolescent?
They're trying to understand their identity.
So there is an identity shift. So this is what's interesting. When an adult likes something in another adult, a secure enough adult, likes something in another adult, All they want is to be a little more similar to the other adult. You with me? Dress a little more like her. Act a little more like her. Yes? But when an adolescent likes something in the other, they want to be the other. Why is that? Because they don't yet have a self. The two main, I'm running a series of lessons at the Well in Brooklyn, which is a wonderful organization that started by Mrs. Sassoon in honor of the continuation of the zchuyot for her children. And I'm running 5 classes on this topic of the most challenging part of humanity is separation and change. So what do I mean by separation? We can, again, talk about this itself. Literally, I'm talking about this for 5 hours in the next few weeks. Today was my second lesson. Another crisis. Let's hope it's a false alarm. Go on with your life. Go on with your life. Does birth hurt? Why? Change, what is the change though? What's the specific change? It is a physical separation between the two bodies. Who does it hurt?
Me.
The mom, but the babies don't talk. It probably hurts them too, right? If we think about what happens to the head, what happens to their change, they have to take in their breath. You with me? Now I know they talk about this. There is such a thing. Don't get sucked into it of birth trauma, and then there's all these therapists against birth trauma. I take the word trauma very seriously. So when people take the word trauma and add it to normative experiences, I have a reaction to it. Birth is birth. Some births are traumatic because they're traumatic. But birth within itself is part of regular process of living, right? But it is painful. Are there any other births that happen later on as parenthood and childhood continues?
Bar mitzvah.
Let's talk about the first time the child holds the bottle on their own, right? Any time the child does something that's independent from the parent, there is a bit of a separation. According to some Freudian thoughts, like Melanie Klein, she talks about object relations. It's a psychoanalytic way of looking at things. The baby doesn't even see the mother as really separate from him yet. When the baby cries, all it wants is a response. It has no concept of, oh, the other is busy. It can't attend to me. There is no idea of the other. You with me? We're going to talk more about this as we go on. But I want you to just think about that. They're going through separation, and they're going through change. Now, why is change scary? It's the unknown. It's out of your comfort zone. What happens to you when you have to change?
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, it's scary, it's painful. You're afraid to lose parts of yourself. What about even changing for the good? Change is always painful because you're shedding parts of you. And shedding hurts. Even if it's parts of you that you don't want. So adolescents are going through separation and through change. One of my most delicious adolescents described it to me once so well. She said, you know what adolescence is? I got permission to say this. She's very proud. She said, it's like being in the airport and not knowing which airplane to go on. And you forgot to get dressed that morning. And everyone's staring. And everyone's yelling at you that you're going the wrong way. And your mother tells you you're fat. And your dad tells you that you're stupid. Let's get back to her, right? She's in the airport, she doesn't know where she's going. She doesn't know how she'll respond to things. Are we with her? She's bombarded by all these messages. She doesn't know where to go. So what's the antidote to kina, to jealousy? What is it that they're seeking? I mean, what is it that they actually want?
To find themselves.
A self, significance. Everybody wants to matter. Everybody wants to matter. The Maharal says that there's two reasons that we sin. One is taiva, and the other one is ego. Can ego be shut down? No. Taiva, you just say, like, this is not kosher, so I'm not going to eat it. It's yes or no. It's whether or not we can control our impulse. Yes or no. But what about ego? Can it be shut down? No, it's stop thinking so highly of yourself. Why can't it be shut down?
Because then you break it, I guess.
Because it is natural, human, spiritual need to feel significance. Ego cannot be shut down, it can only be redirected. What they're looking for is a direction where they could feel significant and where they matter. So what is your role with them when it comes to kina, the emotional piece? What's your role with them?
Guide them. They're looking for direction.
Guidance, acceptance. Do you see acceptance here? Validation. Admiration. Let's go to the next one. We're going to tap back into all of these. I just want to give you the headlines, and we'll tap back into it a little more deeply. There was a question asked. What about when their changes of their hormones and the taiva and the changes that they're going through? Who do you think has more awareness of it, girls or boys?
Girls.
You know what's interesting? Boys. The changes of taiva when it comes to boys is discussed so openly. It's like obvious, like, oh, he's a boy, hormones. But what about girls and what their needs are? Girls' needs are different than boys' needs. But they're a lot less subconscious. Boys are able to talk about it externally. And it's completely accepted in society. And it's actually almost invited. You with me? But a girl's is more subconscious, even to her own self. So when she has a need to appear a certain way in front of others, because she wants accepted, she wants to be seen in a certain way, she wants to be noticed as a female, you with me? Does she know why she's doing that? A boy is able to say that explicitly. If you ask him what he's interested in. But what about a girl? Will she say, really, I'm interested in validation and acceptance? She won't say it. But that's what you need to know. Part of your education when it comes to taiva, when it comes to girls, is helping them connect to what their needs are. You with me?
Isn't it case by case?
It is case by case. I love questions, and I'm going to take them at the end because I hope to be able to address every problem you have, obviously, in the next 45 minutes. I'm going to ask for the door to be closed, please.
To connect to their what? The girls.
To connect to the awareness of what it is that their needs actually are. I skimmed through the kina part, and I skimmed through the part of taiva because I want to get to kavod. Why? Because it's the most important one. You cannot overdo kavod when it comes to your adolescence. What does that mean? Kavod is their, the need for kavod is their what? Their blind spot. If you put them down, they'll need to be put back up. Whatever you tell them, if the response needs to be, but I am, I exist, I matter, you have just slapped them. The blind spot is their need for a self and for validation. So if you're going to slap them with not giving them respect and kavod, of taking them seriously, we're going to talk about what that means. It doesn't mean listening to everything they say. That's not kavod, by the way. Then you have placed a stumbling block in front of them. What are some ways that you can give a child kavod?
You really appreciate when they do something, clean up, before Shabbos, like really just praise them.
Taking them seriously, giving them things to do, consulting with them, yes, for advice, actually listening to them. Okay, so I just gave you a little bit of like very thick brush strokes, but I want to take this deeper, and this is really what I want to do. What I really want to do is I want to give you 4 major concepts. That if you have these concepts, more or less, you can answer your own questions. I want to ask you a question. Somebody asked me, for example, when is the right time to give technology to the kids? What's the right response to this? What's the right response to that? Who is the expert in this room on this topic? I'll tell you something. Who talked about my humility? This isn't my humility. This is just me being honest. I am no more of an expert on being your child's mother than you are. Guess who is the expert to being your child's mother? Hashem didn't make a mistake. He chose you to be your child's mother. You are the expert on your child's mothering, not me. What I want to do is help you become a better expert in whatever you already are. So I don't have answers for you because all you'll get is my own biases. What I have for you is maybe some ways to structure where you can find your own answer. So I want to give you 4 things to think about. I'm going to break it down into different components. If we have these 4 things, then more or less, hopefully, you can address your questions a little bit more, with a little bit more structure. Number 1. The number 1 thing you need to work with your children is your relationship with your children. Right? This is so obvious, but this is so hard to do. What does it mean to really listen to your child? What is a relationship? Now, when somebody is escaping a dangerous situation, when somebody is in a war zone, when they're running away, are they going to stop to see a bird chirping or a flower that they have to snatch and smell? Why not? In crisis, there is no space for exploration. Right. But what about when you're on vacation with your husband one day in a fantasy in 10 years, and you're exploring a new country, and you're just walking around and you're saying like, oh, like that's interesting, like look how this is there. Isn't this a nice, let's just stay here. Who needs to talk about adolescence? And you can see how do these people talk? What do these people eat? What's their garden like, right? What do their flowers smell like? And the birds chirping, yes?
Pay attention to detail.
When you're able to approach things with curiosity, you're able to learn new information. When you're talking to your teenager, most of the time, because of the answers that we gave at the beginning of the lecture, our fears, our anxiety, and our unknown, when we're talking with them, we look like we're running out of a war zone, not that we're looking in a new country. Because we're seeing what's going on, what's happening, where's the danger? What is he going to say? Will I know how to react? Do I want to know that? Do I not? I need to teach him this. I need to teach him that. I don't like this. I need to fix that. Do you hear curiosity? Like, let me hear who you are. So how does the child feel when this is how you're talking to him? He's like, let me get out of that place, and let me get out of that, and oof, she bought that one, right? When they're treated like a crisis, they respond to you like a crisis. I am just going to be out of here just like you want to be out of here. So what does it mean to really talk to your child? What? Listening to them is exactly it, but it's
listening to them with like a face where you're like, whatever you tell me, it's okay.
So
you're like, oh.
Exactly. Listening with them with a face that's inviting, but also a heart that's ready to hear something new. A heart that's ready to hear something that you don't know. Something that you might not like. Something that you might not know what to do with. Are you with me? If a child senses your fear is greater than your curiosity, you're not a safe place. It is now I'm going to say this and you're going to say, but no, my husbands don't know how to do this. I'm going to tell you, empower your husbands to talk to your sons. And they're going to say, oh, my husbands are this. Well, guess what? He is the father you chose for your son to have. So he is the father you have to empower to talk to your sons. Empower your husbands to talk to your sons. Most conversations that are about taiva are best done by fathers to sons. It is part of the men's club. It is part of the growing into that space. They will understand it better. We don't have the same responses. So just want to recenter. So empower them. What does empowerment mean? Find the places. If they're afraid, if they are not sure that they should, empower them. If they have a father, then empower them to talk to their father. If that's not the case for whatever reason, then if you have to be the one to do it, it's better that you do it than nobody else, than nobody. So what are some ways that you actually, when you're speaking to your teenager, it's who are you? What new can I learn about you today? Rav Orlowik said this when I was in seminary. I didn't know how much I would need it every time, but he says, listen more, talk less. We have such an anxiety to put in all our lessons that we end up not letting them speak. We correct everything they say. It's like we're spell check. You know, they say something, you're like, you know, it's really this way. And we're just always adjusting their language. Now, why else is it important for us to speak to our teenagers openly? I had many questions. What?
So that they don't go anywhere else.
Self-confidence. We build self-esteem.
So everybody said, so I'm going to take each one of these things because they each deserve honor. One is that a teenager wants answers. They actually want to be reassured. They are more anxious than you are. I know it's hard to believe. They actually want to be soothed, and they want reassurance. They want to get it from you. They wish they could have it from you. Do you know how many countless adolescents have told me? So I started the conversation with my mom, and then what happened? Like they take the brave step, and then mom does the thing that shuts them down. And then mom gave me that look, and then I saw the anger in her eyes, and then I'm like, okay, no, really? There were no guys at the party. I was just saying like she brought the cousin. This has happened over and over again.
So what do we do if we don't want to hear that? How do we accept what they want to say? Let's say they want to say something so bad. Like, how do you say with an open mind? Like,
So the question is this: do you want to know?
yeah.
Do you want to know? Do you want to know more than you are afraid to know? That's the question. So let's talk about stretching. Stretching, when you're in pregnancy, your uterus stretches to almost 1,000 times its size. Listening to your child say something you don't want to hear is a bigger stretch than what's happening to your uterus. You're doing it out of love. It's hard to do. But you're doing it because you love your child, and your desire to be there with them is greater than your fear of what they're going to say. We're going to take this deeper. Now, sometimes when I ask a client, like, how do you feel about that? And they say, like, I don't know. Like, I have no words. I know that means that there needs to be more space and time so we can find words. Very often, your teenagers will not have words. You will say, so what did you think about that? And they give you a very smart, I don't know. I don't know. Right? And then you're like, what do you mean you don't know? And so what are you telling them? How can you be so dumb? How come you don't know? Do you see the slaps? They're very subtle, right? Slaps don't have to make loud noises, by the way, right? Oh, you don't know. So what do you know? What do you do with it or know? I would love to help you find out. Do you hear the curiosity there? I would love to help you find out. Why do you say, how come you don't know? What are you responding to?
Your own fear.
Your own anxiety. You got it. Okay. Now, another reason why it's important to be there with your child. Another reason why it's important to be there with your child. I had a lot of questions with, what do you do when this crisis happens, when this crisis happens? I could tell you that in most cases, when you have a relationship with your child, you end up knowing about a crisis before it happens. Why? Why is that?
They trust you.
Because they trust you. And I could tell you something. Trauma can happen to anybody. No parent should ever be blamed for a trauma that occurred to their child. But I can tell you that a trauma will be much more quickly reported to a parent when the child feels safe with that parent. Number two, a trauma is also likely to be prevented because sometimes there are subtle things that could happen before that a child can feel safe enough to tell you, or if you're in a relationship with your child, you will be curious enough to notice. Does this make sense? Another reason why I want you to have a relationship of curiosity with your children, amen, is because I'm going to ask you a question. Tell me 10 things, just do this in your brain, that are things about your child that you want to fix right now. Just go through 10 things.
None.
Wow. Okay, you did it? Did anyone have a hard time with that one? Okay, number two, I'm going to ask you another question. Tell me 10 things about your child that are remarkable, unique, positive, meaningful, that are only true about them, and it's something you learned that's new in the past year. 10 things. Yes. Which one is harder to come up with?
The positive.
Why is that?
The negative. Is out there.
Why is that? Okay, ladies, let's recenter. I love listening to you, but I can't listen to myself when I hear you speak to each other. I lose my own train of thought. So here we are. We're able to say the things that are negative about them right away, and the things that are positive are harder to access, which means what's in front of our faces? When we see them, what do we see? And when they are seen by us, what do they see in your eyes? I'll tell you quotes. The hate in my mother's eyes when she tells me don't eat that way. Or the anger in my father's voice. If we're not able to come up with things about our children that are unique, positive, that are about them, how will they have access to them? They will have, and how will they come to you to help them access their higher parts? So I want you to get to know them, because when you actually spend time with them with curiosity, you will actually find fun. You will actually find things that's going to tickle you, the way that toddlers used to tickle you. You'll say like, oh, he thinks that? Oh, she sees it like that? You will find the beauty in your children. It's there. It's there. People, when I talk about relationships to crowds about adolescence, there is a sense of despair. Why is that? Because it feels like what? Sometimes it feels like, is it too late? What if I haven't done it until now? What if I don't have a relationship? Is it too late? What is my answer to that? I cannot tell you that I don't think I would believe in this the amount that I do had I not seen this in my office time and time again. You know, there's a concept that if you eat something without a bracha, I don't know if this is like halachically perfect. Forgive me. It works as the example. And you forgot to say it, and it doesn't give kavod to you to spit it out. It wouldn't be respectful to humanity. Then you swallow it and you make a bracha that it's retroactive on the previous one. I literally experience when parents make changes in relationships that the healing is retroactive. When I have a mother and child in my office, and the child says to the mother, but Ma, you see, like I just need space. I need you to trust me. I know you don't trust me, but all I need is for you to trust me so that I can make my own decisions. That's all I need. And the mother hears her. Not here, right? Hears her. And then the mother gives her a bit more trust. And then 4 weeks later, the girl will tell me, I could never believe my mother could do this for me. Every ounce of mistake that she made doesn't compare to the gallons of repair of the effort that we make as mothers in order to respond more appropriately to our children. They notice. Not only they notice now, they notice and it helps the past. It's almost like, the idea is that children want the healing. Physical things go to chaos, like contrary to popular belief, bodies get worse over time, right? They get less and less pretty. Humanly, I feel like we move towards healing. When a child receives that from a parent, the child wants to respond. So the question is, how do we continue to do that? Let's take this further. We're talking right now about I said we're going to talk about 4 things. We did 1, which is relationship. In relationship, it's curiosity, so you have openness, so you have access to them, and that you have the ability to impact them. Yes? 1 more piece. A lot of questions I was asked, when do I start to talk to my teenagers about changes in the body? When do I start to talk to them? Is it too early? Is it too late? If I introduce drugs, will I be teaching them about drugs? Or will I be telling them what they need to know? What do you need to know in order to respond to where they're at? Where are they at? You need to find out what are their questions and need to know what kind of answers to give them. When you know where they're at, then you can respond to them. Very often, when an adolescent asks you a question, the information they need is very specific to that question. You don't necessarily need to give them the entire biology book and that same when she's 8 years old, for example. You need to listen to the specific question. The only way that you can know what their questions are if you're a safe place for them to ask their questions to. Safer than Google is. Google is so much easier, right? But let me tell you something else. Let's say you talk to them, and let's say you have the best relationship with them. Will you still know everything?
No.
Why not?
Because they're still developing.
So there's no way that you can know because there is what? It's still a process. You with me? When you're in process, you don't know the end result. Which means that adolescence is intrinsically a time of ambiguity. Ambiguity is anxiety-provoking. Anxiety-provoking. Ambiguity is not knowing. We don't know who they're going to turn out to be. We don't know if their character traits will actually turn out okay. We don't know what choices they'll really make. We don't know what she'll actually do at the party. We don't know what he'll actually do away in college. We don't actually know. So what do we do with ambiguity? What do we do with it? What do we do with ambiguity? We learn to live with it. If you can't live with ambiguity, you will force a state where your children are soothing your anxiety. And you will cross the line. For example, reading your children's diaries. If your children are in crisis, I'm not talking about that. I am talking about soothing your ambiguity by having access to your children in a way that's disrespectful to them. You're with me? Does it soothe your ambiguity?
Does that include cell phones?
That is a different...
Cell phones.
Looking through their cell phones is the same if they don't know that's what you're doing. Now, them knowing if that's what you're doing, that it's not the same. Then you're giving them respect. That's not a slap. That's not a hit. You with me?
What if they don't find out?
No, I'm just saying, if you're doing it, technically you're doing it for their own good.
So this is, so
Not gonna be for their own good, is it?
listen, we can readdress this question towards the end of the session if we still have it. I have this case. I'm going to take questions at the end. I want to hear your questions.
I don't have a question. I just have something related that may help.
Okay, I want to hear it, but I want to hear it at the end because I don't want to lose the flow. Thank you. Okay. It's good to see you. I have a mother that comes in and says, my daughter doesn't tell me anything. She doesn't tell me anything. I want her to tell me things. Now, the daughter happens to be my client. Why doesn't the daughter tell her mother things?
She tells you something.
What?
She tells you those things.
What? Guess what? Can I tell you something? Who do I want the daughter to tell it to? What's my goal? Yes. I wish that she told her mother. That is my goal even before she gets into the room. I know that no matter how much she trusts me, I will never replace a mother to her. In fact, the more she trusts you, the more I wish she trusts her mom. That's the goal. She tells me my mom wants to know only so that she no longer feels worried, but that she doesn't really want to know. She doesn't really want to know. They know. She just wants to know so that she has information on me. When they feel like it's about you, the love is not there. So when you are forcing them out of ambiguity, it means that you're soothing your anxiety. So it's two things. Number one is relationship. Number two is tolerating the ambiguity that is a natural part of raising adolescents. When you're in that space of ambiguity, it does not mean something is wrong. It means that you have children that are growing up. Now, I want to tell you something. I'm so happy that Amudim is here to discuss drugs because they're much better at that than I am. Amudim is an organization, a remarkable organization that takes care of people inside out. And they mean it. They do it well and they mean it. I could tell you I know that from the inside. But I could tell you that ambiguity does not mean avoidance. I'll tell you why I'm mentioning drugs here. Most of the phone calls that I'm going to just mention it quickly and I'm going to let Amudim do the rest. Most of the phone calls that I get when it comes to drug use in our community has more to do with avoidance than it has to do with ambiguity. Which means that we don't know as much as we should know. And we're missing more than we should be missing. So when Amudim comes up here to speak about drugs, let's open our ears because we need to know better. I don't think our children are being noticed when it comes to drug use. And I'm telling you, I know this from my office. I think that ambiguity is important, but I made a note here for myself. It doesn't mean that you can get comfortable in avoiding an issue. This is especially the case with sons, I've noticed. I haven't done statistical analysis on this, but I'm just telling you clinically and anecdotally what I have seen. And there's this like, oh, he'll grow out of it thing. That's not so simple. And that's the reason why I feel so good for you, so good for us, that we have Amudim here with us that can fill us in on more information and empowerment when it comes to drugs. I think what we're missing is information and facing it in reality. There's a lot of avoidance. So that's a piece about ambiguity. Number one is working on the relationship with curiosity and openness. Number two is living in ambiguity because adolescence is a process. Number three is living in tension. Tension when it comes to three things. Tension between the trust and boundaries, tension between lessons and relationship, and tension between their higher self and their lower self. I'll start with number one. Tension between trust and boundaries. Do children need to be trusted?
Yeah.
Okay. Why is that important? I can tell you, for example, this morning I was running to a lecture, and my nanny was coming a little after I was going to be ready fully. So I decided to pray in the morning while the baby was with me alone. So I put him in his crib, which is very pretty, that he doesn't use. Maybe I can get an amen that he could start using his crib. Is that okay? Very good. Anyway, he likes to play in it. I know it's for sleep, but he does like to play in it. So he's playing with his toys. He's delicious, and I'm praying the Amidah, and there is a toy that's a little bit far away that he can't reach. Now I have this whole conflict in my head. I'm like, I know this is not an emergency, so I don't know if I can interrupt my Amidah to go and help him. But like, I'm really distressed. Because it's like right there, you just can't, It's just, I decided he's not in distress, and I continued to pray. I turn around, and guess what?
You got it.
If we don't trust the process, we can intervene with their development. We need to let them be a little frustrated. We need to let them be stretching to try to reach. That's part of trust. Why else is trust important? I've given this example before. There is a scenario on the bus, and there is a bus monitors. They're like, right? They're like therapists and doctors. They know all the rules. They're like, right? You have to honor the bus monitor said, no snacks, right? Okay.
You can have, you can have.
Right. And she decides who can have snacks, who cannot have snacks. She's the president of the bus. So the bus monitor is there, and a new girl gets on the bus. And this new girl, she doesn't know the rules yet. She has weird snacks. She dresses weird, right? She has weird clothing. The bus monitor is there, and we're gonna invite her in, and we're gonna respect her and respond to her well. So you have two girls. You have one that is nice to her when the bus monitor is there, and then you have another one that notices her loneliness, that notices that she feels out of place, and she sits next to her even when the president is not present. Who do you want your daughter to be? If we are always, thank you so much. Thank you. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדברו. If our children are always under our surveillance, then they're always responding to us like we're the presidents that they are trying to please. You want your children to be able to be who you're teaching them to be, not just to respond to you because it makes you feel better about your parenting. You want them to internalize the lessons, not just be robots in how they respond to you. With technology, a similar piece over there. They need boundaries, and I'm going to talk about boundaries next. But they also one day will have a phone on their own, completely, whether or not you have boundaries now. At some point, you want them to build a relationship where they can trust who? Themselves. That they feel empowered, that they can make good decisions. If there are no opportunities for that, how will they know that they could do it? So there needs to be some trust, and there needs to be some space. Can I be in this world? Can I be trusted? But why are boundaries important? I can tell you that when I worked at this school for teens at risk, very often when parents just got so tired of it, they just went the other extreme and they just gave up on everything. They're like, okay, just do whatever you want, right? Do whatever you want. And guess what? The fighting went down. Is this true? Yes. Maybe the teenagers were happy around, and maybe sometimes it's something to do, maybe, if there is a real emergency. But what was interesting is, I remember one time, one of the girls, she had a hard time she smoked a lot. She smoked like packs and packs of cigarettes a day. And her father was a health freak. And it was something that bothered him more than anything else that she did. But this was one of these families that went the other extreme and just gave up on everything. And I remember one day she comes into my office and she sits down and she says, Dr. Perlman, it's been 17 and a half days. It's 2 p.m. I'm like, of what? She's like, I haven't touched a cigarette. I'm like, you haven't what? Like, she had that self-control. She was on a path to taking care of herself and making good decisions. This was just the first step. So then I asked her, did you tell your? And guess what she said? No. He doesn't even care. He gave up on me a long time ago. Letting go of rules can sometimes feel not like permission, but like permissiveness. Anything goes. Anything goes does not feel loving to a child. It doesn't feel like they matter anymore. Expectations are one way to express care. We expect more from you. Boundaries express care. What else is important in boundaries? Why do they need them?
To feel secure.
For their own security, to feel secure and to actually be secure. Right? There is a reason why you wouldn't let a toddler go near the oven. Right? And there's a reason why certain parameters need to be set up around teenagers. But now the questions are going to be, what are those parameters? I'll take questions at the end. I want you to think about 3 things when it comes to lessons. Number 1, what is the actual lesson that you're teaching? You don't know how many times a teenager will say to me, I have no idea why they're disappointed in me. I feel like I'm walking around and they're like, everything I do. I don't even know what thing that they're eyeing about. What's the actual lesson? Now you yourself, again, you have ambiguity, you have anxiety, you have fear. You don't even know yourself sometimes what you're eyeing about, right? We're just unhappy. We don't like it. Number 1, what is the actual lesson? What is the value? I'm going to give an example and we go through an example. Number 2, where is he at? Where is she at right now? And number 3, this is, I think, the most important one. What are my choices? Let's now take an example and let's go through it with an example. So again, number 1, what's the lesson? Number 2, where's he at? Number 3, what are my choices? Number 1, let's take technology. What are the lessons in technology? Why do we need to have boundaries around technology?
Inappropriate material.
Safety about exposure, responsibility, right? Responsibility with time. Self-regulation, you with me? Okay, so you have to be explicit about these rules. It's not like you're bad, technology is bad, it's not okay together. You need to be explicit about these rules. I will say something specific. And you have to consider number 2. I do think that having some boundaries around smartphones is important with adolescents. The access is very wide and very deep. And it's not just amount, it's also variety. And it is a lot for an adolescent to handle. So if you're still in a place that you could create some kind of a filter for your child, I really support that. If you're not, then we'll go to number 2. Where is he at? You cannot make a rule that your daughter cut her hair short. Like, there are rules in certain Beis Yaakovs in let's say in Muncie or in Borough Park, let's say, right? That your hair has to be short and you have to wear a certain type of tights, right? There are certain rules. You cannot tell a girl that's going to a modern Orthodox school in Queens to dress like a Borough Park girl. Is this true? Why not? Because you're telling her, you're an adolescent, you're in this airport, you forgot to get dressed, you don't know where to go, and you're going to for sure look awkward, and for sure you're going to be an outsider. It's like you're killing her social chances. She already doesn't feel like she belongs. Now she really doesn't belong. It's the same way you cannot take your child and put him in a school where everyone has a phone and he doesn't. And so part of your choosing your children's schools, you're also choosing what battles you're going to fight. You cannot blame your child for being socially normal. His environment.
The same for like kids in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Yes. Anywhere your child is the environment they're in. You have to take their environment into account. Your child's habits, where he's at, what he's been used to. Are you with me? Okay.
What about what you're doing at home? Like,
What you're doing is also important, but you're not an adolescent. Oh, thank you so much. I want it with steamed milk next time. No. Thank you, ladies. So number 3. What are your choices? You have to make clear and limited borders. Don't be afraid that he's not going to like it, because guess what? If he likes it, then it's not really a boundary. That's the reason why I call this category tension. If you want it to be tense-free, it's not going to happen. It is intrinsically a space of tension. You with me? Okay. You are the adult. Remember that. When in those fighting matches that none of us do. None of us do that. But remember that you are the adult, right? Clear, limited boundaries. Number 2, this is the piece of once you set up the boundaries. It's something that you have to be able to enforce. So if you tell your child, put down your phone after 10, haha. Are you there watching your child do it? He's not going to end up doing it, and where does that put you? In a place of what? Disempowerment. You have just been disempowered because you gave a rule that he cannot keep. And this is the most important one. If you make an adjustment, which, by the way, should you make adjustments or not? If you're not making adjustments, you're probably making mistakes. Because the tension means that you have to remain in a place where you're constantly balancing the trust and the boundaries. And sometimes if the rubber band goes too much this way, then you have to adjust this way. And you see that they're suffocating and they need more space and they need more, and you could trust them more because they've been able to make good choices, then you can open it up. And then you see, you know what, they've been on their phone too much, or they have not been respecting the rules of curfew. They've been coming home way too late. Then you can readjust it. If you're adjusting, that usually means that you're doing the right thing. But when you do adjust, don't do it, oh, you're driving me crazy. I'm just giving up. Because then who is suddenly the one in power? They have power over you. You're saying, I'm making a choice, and it's now an opportunity to what? Show them respect. I see this is what you need. And show them also what? Care. I see that this is what you need. So when you make an adjustment, don't do it out of martyrhood. Oh, the weak, poor me, right? Do it because you made a decision based on what you are seeing in them, because you're taking them seriously. You with me? And what are your choices? Somebody asked me a question. It was a great question. What do you do if your child wants this, but you want that? So first of all, you could cry. Is this true? But then the question is, what is your actual choice? What is actually your choice? You can be upset at them. Could you force it?
you can try.
I want you to think about it. What is my choice? And I want you to take between two options, this one or this one. So these are 3 things. What's the lesson? Where's he at? What are your choices? And within that, clear boundaries, accessible to both of you. And when you adjust, make it an empowered adjustment, not a disempowered adjustment. The second tension is between relationships and lessons. There was a kid that cheated in every class. She told me. She said, I cheat in math, You just put a cheat sheet in the calculator. It's very simple, and now everything is I just put notes for myself, and it's like genius the ways that she cheats. I cheat in Hebrew. I cheat in this. I cheat in that, and then I asked her about a certain class that she did really well, and I said, did you also cheat in this? And she's like, I would never cheat in Miss A's class. Never. And who is Miss A?
Probably the one who cares.
Who is Miss A? She said, when I was in 4th grade, I stole something from a friend. And Miss A saw me do it. And she talked to me quietly and whispered in my ear, and she said, I saw you do that. That's not like you. I know you're going to do the right thing. She said, I have so much respect for Miss A, I would never cheat in her class. When they have respect for us, it will be harder for them to not listen. The stronger the relationship, the less you have to discipline. Because the more powerful, even a tiny look. I don't want to disappoint my father. He's always been there for me. I know if he knows this about me, it would kill him. Can you please not tell him, Dr. Perlman? I'm working on it. That's a power of our father who's always been there for her, and he doesn't even know he's disciplining her, even when he's not. The stronger your respect for your child and the relationship, the less discipline you have to do. It's like the letter, the story with the rabbis where the letter became less and less and it was empty. Do you know that story? Where there were rabbis writing letters to each other and there was a carrier carrying it back and forth. And it was so important to both of these rabbis. And at one point, he'd had to go through the storm and through the ocean to get to the other rabbi, and his taiva or whatever overcame, and he was so curious, and he looked in the envelope, and there was nothing there. And he went to the rabbi, and he said, are you kidding me? You're making me carry out an empty letter? And he said, it's not empty. I know exactly what he means. Yeah. Sometimes when the love is so strong, you don't have to be so loud. Even a quiet space, even a quiet way of saying things is strong enough. If we align with them, then we can teach them better. So the tension between discipline and relationship. You have to always keep it at the tension. More relationship, less discipline, and always try to keep where am I at? What do I have to increase here? Are you with me? There are some stories that I hear that I respond to, and it stays with me just for that moment. And there are other stories that I hear that stay with me forever. Do you know the story? I've said this, you for sure heard it, some of you. But I love repeating it. Rav Breslov's story about the king with the painting. Is it okay if I repeat it for those of you that haven't heard it? This is a lesson about attention. I'll tell it very quickly. There was a painter, he got to paint everybody's painting. And his goal was that he painted all the presidents and all the monarchies and everyone in charge, except there was one king that was a mystery. Nobody saw his face. You with me? And it was his mission to what? Paint that king. His connection was not complete till the king was painted. So he bribed, and he bullied, and he got into the palace. And he bribed, and he bullied, and he pushed, and he got to the king's chamber. And he's there, and there is a big curtain, right? And he's like, I am here, I'm going to paint the king, I'm going to have access to this king. And he starts to demean the king. And he starts to diminish his protection. Starts to take away the king's layers of protection. He says, I got through your guards. They all have weaknesses. I know their weaknesses. None of your people really respect you because here I am, nobody protected you. And nobody knows you. How do you know that people are even serving you? Because you're never outside. So he's taking away all his weak points. He's pressing on them. And what's happening to the curtain? What's happening to it? It's lowering and it's fading away. And what is he feeling? He's feeling empowered. You with me? He's like, I'm getting to the king. No one has gotten to the king, and I'm going to get to him. And the more that he does it, the more empowered he feels, and he sees the curtain is diminishing and fading away. And he knows all the weak points. He knows what to say. He says, you think that your most loyal guard is loyal to you? He's not loyal to you. You don't even know who he is, really, because he let me come in here. I know all your weaknesses. I know all the facades you put up. You have nothing to defend you. And suddenly the curtain is gone. It's gone. I remember, I just want to tell you, I was in my dining room when I heard the story. And as I walked into my kitchen, I couldn't stop crying. Because in my eyes were all the girls that have told me the story in their own voices. The curtain was gone. And the painter was now empowered to paint the king. He's like, I'm going to see the king now. But guess what was in front of him? The king was no longer there. There was nothing there. The king was gone. You can see this parable any way you like. Either that he couldn't see the king with his own eyes, or that the king was not there. But sometimes we feel so empowered. We know what will push our kid's button. We'll say this, and we see him crumble. We see her respond, and she feels shame, and she's crumbling away. And we're like, we're reaching them. We're going to get to her. And we feel so much power. Yes, we're getting to her. But at the end, you've lost her defenses. You feel powerful, but she doesn't even want to show herself to you. You've lost the sight of her. You no longer see who he is. He doesn't feel like he wants to be seen by you. Not by this painter. Not the one that talks to me this way. We have to have the balance of relationship and discipline. But discipline can never take away the child. Because you can feel powerful that the curtain is gone. But if you can't see your child, or the child doesn't want to show himself to you, then you've done nothing. Number 3, tension between boundaries and trust. Tension between lessons and relationship. And number 3, tension between their different parts. And then we are going to wrap up with this. How's my timing, by the way?
Pretty good.
Okay, good. Thank God. Okay. Sometimes is it when you look at your child, do you like what you see? Are you supposed to see your child's weaknesses? Yes, so that you can help redirect them and create boundaries around them. You're with me? So you know you can help him deal with his challenges. Sometimes we don't want to see our kids' challenges, and in fact, this is something I heard from our buddy Heller recently, that our guilt, it was because of this, and because I gave him too much that, I gave him too much that. It's really, in a way, misguided love. It's easier for us to blame ourselves than to see our children for who they are. So we need to see their challenges so we can help them. You don't know how often I get, if a parent comes and when a parent comes in from like a school point of view, and like the principal calls me and says, I don't know what to do with this parent. I'm telling this parent, your child is completely not responsive. And the parent is just blaming us. And it's throwing lawsuits at us and this and that. Who is the parent doing a disservice to? Very often the child. Because the parent is not seeing, what is my child's role here? How can I help him here? How is he not going to be a husband like this in 10 years from now, or a wife like this 10 years from now? But there's something we have to do to be careful about. While we see their worst parts, like I did at the beginning of the lecture, we also have to see their best parts. And we have to be in a constant tension between these two. We have to work at it. We have to never lose sight of their higher selves while protecting them from their lowest selves. I want you to do an imagery for 3 minutes. Not 3 minutes, sorry, 30 seconds. 3 minutes is a very long time. Rav Nachman says that imagery is the relationship between the body and the spirit, because it is something that's physical, and it's also something that incorporates the spiritual, because it is not actually physically here. So it's on the bridge between the spiritual and the physical. Imagery is very powerful in therapy. I use it all the time. I want you to take your most anxiety-provoking kid. So much fun. So much fun. 30 seconds. And I want you to picture this kid, specifically this kid, in this kid's highest self. You can picture walking this kid down the aisle. You can picture this kid holding his child. You can picture this kid across from you at a coffee table. Just picture her and picture him with her strengths that you know from childhood. And when she was 5 years old, you could tell the Mora, she's so special, Mora, you don't know. She's so special. The things that you said about her when she was 8, the things that you said about him when he was 2 years old. Take his uniqueness. Picture them in an adult. Sit across from him. Look at him in the face. Can you picture her? Can you picture him? Do you like him? Do you like her? So exciting. Sometimes when you see your fear of the worst self that they become, balance it with this picture. Remember, they're in transition. Do not identify them with the process. Adolescence is not who they are. Okay. Secret message I received.
Sharing it with us.
It's very boring. It's a very technical piece. Can we recenter?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last phrase?
The last phrase is this. Imagine this happened to me last week. I always act perfectly, I just want you to know. But sometimes I act imperfectly so I can give you examples. So this was one of those times. I made this really fancy mushroom dish. It was a very Sephardi dish because it had at least 10 steps in it. And one of them was frying onions and the other one was checking herbs. As long as you have 10 steps, then it's an acceptable salad. Are you with me? So I made this dish and I'm taking it out, and guess what happens? Can you picture it? We just did picture it. It just like splattered everywhere, but so perfectly that it actually went like everywhere in such a, it was almost like artful. Yes. It was just like, so to say the least, even though I have perfect emotion regulation skills, right? I was frazzled. Now imagine someone walked in that moment and saw me there. And they said, that's who Dr. Perlman is. This is what it is when we identify our kids in adolescence. Don't tell him this is who you are, because they're in the frazzled moment of things happening. So that was my last statement. Keep the tension between the higher self and lower self, and do not identify them in your own self and to them by their lowest selves. Okay. Now the last piece and the hardest piece. A few months ago, I had a woman come in. By the way, when I share stories, I have so much deep respect for every client that I get to sit across from. I could never talk about them. I respect them and love them too much. But they teach me so much. I can't not share with you the stories, the lessons they teach me. So when I talk to you about when she said, what I'm really telling you about, this is what she taught me. She said, I have no relationship with this daughter. She's embarrassing me. I'm embarrassed of her in the street. This is how she is. And within the space where she's at, the way she looks on the street is embarrassing for her. She doesn't talk to me. I have nothing for her. I don't even know who she is. And I don't think she ever wants to talk to me. I'm disappointed in her. I'm mad at her. You with me? Yeah. I feel guilty towards everything that has happened with her. And I've lost her. This was, let's say, 4 or 5 months ago. Her child is going through changes. Is this true? Our teenagers are asking themselves, who am I? Right? They're not really. But they're just acting the way that they are. And what they're doing is asking themselves, who am I? And then you're asking about them, who are you? Yes? But what else is happening? Well, that's happening. We look at our teenager, and we see that she said that. And he did this. And this is what happened in school. And this is what happened with their friend. And then you ask yourselves, who am I? What did I erase? Where are my rules? Where are my values? Did anything come across? What did I even do? Is anything that I did worthwhile? I don't even know who I am. What even matters to me anymore? I don't know if this matters or that matters. Are you with me? I don't even know, should I give up on this? But this felt so important to me. But should I keep this rule? But he's driving me crazy. I can't believe she did that. I would never think she would do that. I didn't even know that I could raise that. Are you with me? As they're going through their adolescence, in a way, so are we. We are constantly adjusting our identity, mindset, our rules, our self-worth. It's really scary. It's very disorienting, yes? We blame ourselves. We blame them. Plenty, right? We are separating just as much as they're separating. And we are changing at least as much as they are. And if we're not changing, then something is wrong. So this is what I want to tell you. Is the only way that your teenager can go through his adolescence is if he embraces the journey of needing to change. Is this true? Yes. You cannot stay little anymore. You have to grow up. It is hard to grow up, but you cannot stay little anymore. You have to grow up. And the only way that we'll tolerate our children changing is if we don't escape our own need to change. We need to change along with them. And while we're teaching them, they're teaching us. And if we're not learning something about ourselves, then we're missing the boat. After you've figured out what they need, look at yourself and ask, who do I have to be here? What is he asking me to be? More compassionate, more soft, more open, more clear. A few weeks ago, this client came back. And she said a remarkable thing happened. She said, my daughter started to talk to me. It's a miracle every time. I always see them, like the people in front of me change, and they're like, I don't know what happened, right? And there was a piece that's her daughter told her. And she said, for the first time, I don't feel lonely when I talk to you, Mom. For the first time, I feel like you're actually listening to me. And she said to me, Dr. Perlman, I need her because I need to know how to listen in a way where she doesn't feel lonely. So ladies, this is what I'm asking you. You know how we spoke about ambiguity? And we said there are places that we don't know about our children, right? And it's so scary. And at the end, let's say you make a decision to let your daughter go to that party. And let's say you make a decision to let your son go to that program. And you can't go there with her. You can't go and sit there on the bed with him and see how he brushes his teeth, if he ever does. And how he respects that girl. And whether or not he does responsible things. You want to be there with them in those private places, but you can't be. You can't be. Is this true? Yes. They have their private battles to fight. You will give them what you can. You'll try to be there for them, try to guide them, try to create the boundaries, but at the end, your children are separate from you and they will make their own decisions. And you cannot be there in their most private battles. But while this is happening, you also have your private battle. And your child doesn't need to know about your private battle. Don't blame him for it. Just the same way that he can't blame you for his. Although he does. Ma, it's all your fault. Right? As ridiculous as that is, it's as ridiculous to say you're driving me crazy. No, you're not driving me crazy. The changes you're going through are making me have to change, and that sometimes feels crazy making. They don't have to know about your private battles and what it causes between you and your husband. He has his own to fight. What can you do about those private spaces? First of all, in the places you can't be there with him, pray for him. He is not alone in it, even though he feels alone. It's the only way that he can fight a battle is if he thinks he's alone in it. But say, I do this. Ask Hashem, in the places I cannot be with my child, please be there with him. In the places I cannot be with my daughter, please be there with her. And while you're praying for them in their private battles, also pray for yours. I don't know sometimes what to do. And I don't have all the answers even after Dr. Perlman's speech. And I sometimes feel lost and crazy. But in this private battle, guide me. Show me, who am I supposed to grow into? I know I need to be a different mother now than I was 10 minutes ago before I heard what my daughter just told me. If I stay the same, I cannot respond to her the same way. Help me grow into the person I am supposed to be while they grow into theirs. I want to read to you, with permission, a poem somebody very wise wrote and gave me permission to share. Parenting adolescence. Living in ambiguity, loving in expansion, mourning innocence, hoping in tears, protecting with fierceness, trusting with trepidation, watching them become selves other than you, learning they don't belong to you, but you eternally belong to them. Ladies, I wish us all a journey where the images we had of their higher selves are the ones we get to experience. And also that we find our own higher selves. We don't escape our own journey. And that we become the mothers we're supposed to be as they teach us. Thank you, ladies.
So, first of all, a big thank you to everybody that's here tonight. I'm sorry, unlike Dr. Perlman, I can't speak as loud. I apologize. If you don't believe me, ask my wife. She'll tell you I don't know how to raise my voice at all. Right, honey? Okay, just making sure. But a big thank you to everybody that's here tonight. A weeknight, a lot going on, just to show the dedication and to hear the keynote speaker, Dr. Perlman, who's amazing, who never ceases to amaze me, both in her clinical ability and her ability to express things. And the truth is, the main reason why I'm a big fan is because prevention is the key, and we'd like to be out of business. And I mean that in a good way, because of lack of need, not lack of money. And if more parents would take an approach to understand what's really going on out there, and at least take whatever steps they could, and do a lot of prayer, it'll make our lives a lot easier. So that's being a little bit selfish. So really a big round of applause to everybody that's here tonight for coming and for me breaking somebody's recorder. I don't know whose that is. Is this yours? Okay, good. Good thing it's a backup. See, this is why Dr. Perlman didn't use the podium. So people ask me all the time, and I say this seriously, Baruch Hashem, I'm not I don't even want to know what French she's talking about, but the person's probably not talking about me, but talking about my staff. My staff are all clinicians, I'm not. They're the ones that are actually doing the heavy lifting. They make me look good. Everybody's happy. It's a win-win. But people ask me all the time, why do you continue speaking about the same topics over and over and over again? Isn't it getting boring? And my response is always the same. I'm going to stop talking about it when I don't have to, and when these issues are no longer real. Now, the problem is that one would think that by this point already, we can be more open about things. But I have to say that just in the last couple of weeks, in our community, and I am a part of this community as well, for my first many years of marriage, I davened upstairs here, I lived 5 blocks that way, 2 blocks to the left. Now I'm in Kew Gardens Hills, so Queens is my home. We've lost 6 youth in the last 3 weeks in our community. All of them were lost to something other than what they died from. All of them. And I don't chas v'shalom blame anybody for not wanting to be open about why a loved one passed away, because nobody wants to go through that shame. But at the same time, if we don't accept the reality, it's much harder to break the stigma. And if we can't break the stigma, we can't get people the help that they need. And we can't make people feel comfortable enough to reach out and say, what is it that can be done? So I'm going to go through a few practical skills, and I'm going to cut my speech a little bit shorter than I was going to. Step number 1, and this is very much in line with what you've just heard, we need to show support for those that are suffering and struggling. They need us more than ever. Has anybody here ever heard of somebody going into a hospital and blaming somebody who got sick with an illness? Even somebody that smoked, that developed lung cancer, when they're sitting in that hospital room in Sloan Kettering, is their family yelling at them saying, you smoked, you did this to yourself? Or are they being supportive and praying for them and hoping that they get better? We need to understand that addiction is a disease. It's an illness. Nobody wakes up in the morning and decides, I want to be an addict. 21 years, I've never had that happen yet. Not one person. Not one. Yet for some reason, when people are suffering with addiction, it's everybody's fault. So rule number 1, we need to learn to be there, to be compassionate. There's somebody that both Dr. Perlman and I are very close with who repeated this story, and it scared me. Says that he works also with teens at risk, primarily girls, and he does support groups. And he was at a support group one night, and a woman looks at him and goes, Rabbi, sometimes I wish my daughter had cancer. And he looks at her and goes, why would you say that? And he says, why? Because my neighbor's son has cancer, and all the neighbors come over to help, and are involved, and are concerned, and care. And I have a daughter that's on drugs, that's no longer religious, so none of my younger children have any friends, because the neighbors won't let their kids come to my house. Nobody looks at us. They look down at our entire family. If my daughter had cancer, people would care about me. Probably one of the most heartbreaking stories I have ever heard. The second component is providing support for what we call the other affected parties. Very often when dealing with addiction, and people don't realize this, it's a family disease. It doesn't only affect the person who is abusing drugs, alcohol, or whatever the addiction could be, but it affects their spouse, their children, their parents, their siblings. And very often, the person who is actually in need does not accept it and does not know that they want to get help. And I could proudly say we at Amudim don't believe in that theory that so many people have heard, and I'm sure many of you have heard it too. Oh, until he's ready to get help, don't call me and hang up. No. Provide support for everybody around the person who's suffering or struggling, so that they can learn to be a support for the person who needs it. So together, we can have a holistic approach to helping them. It is sometimes more important to help the loved ones than the person who's suffering from the addiction themselves. I use the example, we talk about, one of the many methodologies of treatment is people going to AA meetings. So by a raise of hands, how many have heard of AA meetings? How many have heard of Al-Anon meetings? Okay, so exactly my point. Al-Anon meetings is the equivalent of AA, whereas AA is where the addict goes. Al-Anon meetings is where the other affected individuals go. So the spouses of an addict, the children, the parents, sometimes the close friends. Just as important as it is for an addict to be able to go to recovery is important for the support structure to be there as well. The other thing about addiction, and this is the most common request that we get, we field about 200 calls a day now. A lot of them are calling the First National Bank of Amudim, which is not FDIC insured, so it doesn't really help. And they want to know if we can help fund hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of treatment. I hate to break the news to those that own drug rehabs and like to keep the revolving door effect making a lot of people rich. Treatment does not have to break the bank, does not have to put people into the poorhouse, does not have to cause people to refinance their homes. I will tell you, about 6 years ago, there was a mother who sold her candlesticks so that she can help pay for her son to go to treatment, when there were 11 other treatment options equally or better than the one she was sending her child to that accepted the insurance that she had. And this is something we see every single day. Literally, I'm not exaggerating, every single day. I have two of my clinical case managers are here. They're in the back. You're welcome to speak to them afterwards. They can share this with you and you can ask them anything else you want. Every single day. People right away assume if something costs $100,000, that must mean it's the best course of action. No, that means that the guy that owns it needs to make $100,000. Okay? And very often, especially in peer-to-peer support, such as AA meetings, Al-Anon meetings, for the gambling addicts, GA meetings, all the other types of fellowships, they're free. So that's extreme, and I literally have to say, I have watched families go bankrupt, and the sad part by us is they're not calling Amudim until they're already bankrupt. Now it's my headache. And this is where it becomes another vicious cycle. Every time somebody goes to a program or to a treatment, and for some reason they don't end or finish it or complete it or remain sober, what are the chances of them wanting to go to another one versus what are the chances of them feeling like a failure? So I say this very clearly, bad treatment is sometimes worse than no treatment. And it is extremely important when people are going through addiction to get them the help that they need, to understand that not everything that worked for person A will work for person B. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard someone say to me, Tzvi, we got to send my son to this and this place because my friend sent there and it did great. Well, yeah, but your son's addiction isn't the same as your friend's son's addiction. Or the underlying cause for addiction. I can tell you, we could put together 5 adult males, 42 years old, all using the exact same drugs, the exact same dosage, and just as often. And each of them will need a different type of treatment. One could be using drugs because they were suffering from trauma or abuse as a child. One could have had a surgery that went bad, got hooked on painkillers. One could have started just recreationally. There's so many different reasons. And understanding the underlying reason for the addiction will also help determine the best course of action and proper treatment. So there's no one size fits all. It is so important, and I say this again, to try to make sure that if people are finally getting the help that they need, they get the proper help, and they get it the first time around. It doesn't always work. Nothing is guaranteed in life, but we got to do the best we can. The amount of research that our staff do on every single program to understand what the clinicians there are like, what the staff is like, what the family workshops are like. You know, there's so many different pieces. I'll give you another example. There's this concept that I'm sure many people have heard. In order to get better, you need to be sent away, right? Now, let me throw this example at you. Somebody goes to rehab, and this is the part that I always find interesting. It's supposed to be, they start off always the same thing, 28-day program. And then all of a sudden it went from 28 days to, oh, we need to do extended care. Oh, we need to do extended care. Oh, we need to do, by the time you're done, it's 6 months later. 6 months later, and I'm going to use the example of a husband comes back home. And what's generally the first thing that the wife does? You left me for 6 months. I was home with the kids. I couldn't deal with the bills, tuition, food. What's easier for this person to do? Deal with the wife or just go back to rehab? Rehab's great. Where are the triggers that are causing the person who's struggling from addiction to want to use or do whatever their addiction is? At home. So much better to try to find treatment closer to home so that they can work on whatever those triggers are with their spouse, loved ones, parents, children, siblings, so that they can get rid of those triggers and not have to have this revolving door effect. Again, something that we hear all the time. Now we have the other component. How many people know people that might have benefited from going for treatment, whether it's therapy, whether it's 12-step meetings, whether it's rehab, but all of a sudden they're worried about the stigma. People are going to find out, especially in smaller communities. I've said this story 100 times. I'll say it again. If those have heard it, I apologize. One of the stories, I witnessed this and it was scary to me. I was by a woman, she had 5 children, and she was struggling with opioids after a botched surgical procedure of her last child during childbirth. And this was a painkiller addiction that just led to what it led to. And I'll never forget sitting in the room with her husband, her parents, her in-laws, her family Rav. There was an interventionist. And everybody's talking to her and nobody's getting through to her. And I finally look at her and I say, Mrs. So-and-so, you realize the direction you're heading is you're going to die. That's it. And this is a well-respected woman from a good family. Nobody would have ever even known. And she says, I know, but I'm still not going to rehab. And I said, why? And she used the dirtiest word in the Jewish language that starts with the letter S. Shidduchim. If I go to rehab, who is going to marry my children? To which I turned to her and I said, and if you're dead? She goes, well, if I'm dead, then my children will be orphans. People will marry them. I'm happy to tell you, thank God she's actually sober. We got her to go and she's doing amazing, Baruch Hashem. But the fact that that was her concern, was she wrong? No, it's actually a valid concern, unfortunately. We have to break the stigma associated with people that are struggling, and we can't break that stigma till we accept that it's a disease. And once we accept that it's a disease, it's like somebody that has cancer, and I use that example purposely, because yes, I know I could say it's someone that has diabetes, but I'm going all out for a reason, and we don't blame the person that has cancer, we cannot blame the person that has the addiction. And then there's another thing, we seem to forget, and this I know, you heard earlier, but children, they also learn from our behaviors, right? So very often we look at alcohol as something that is not such a big deal. Now, let me ask you, does anybody here know what the average age in America is that parents first talk about to their children about alcohol? 18, 13, 12. Anybody here know what the average age in America is when a child has their first hidden drink? 9. Average age in America, I know. Average age in the United States is 13 that we talk about it, 9 when they take their first drink. Anybody see a problem with that? Right. Now, I'm not saying go talk to your child about alcohol at 9 years old by starting to explain every piece of the puzzle. Everything's got to be age appropriate. But let me ask a different question. How many people are careful with the alcohol in their homes? How many people are personifying alcohol? How many times are men getting together and talking about this bottle, 31 years, 25 years, 20, and all of a sudden that becomes the conversation, and what are the kids seeing? What are we teaching our children? This bottle that I bought is the most important topic at this conversation, or this, I made fun of this. 2 years ago, my family was in Israel for Sukkot, and the amount of alcohol and that was going on, in Rehavia, it was insane. And all of a sudden I'm hearing these yeshiva students and seminary girls talking about it like these are experts. This vintage and this wine and these great... They had no idea what they were talking about. And let's all be very honest for a second. By the third shot, none of us know what we're talking about. Okay, so you can take a $10 bottle or a $100 bottle, it makes no difference. But the fact is, when the children are... And by the way, I'm not going to deny this. I enjoy drinking responsibly. I'm not saying that there should be no alcohol. I'm saying be responsible. I say this all the time. In my house, the liquor cabinet, actually the glass is covered with pictures. So my kids are not coming down every morning and sitting at the table eating breakfast looking at bottles of wine or bottles of scotch. That's not what's on display. A bottle comes out to make a l'chaim by a meal, the bottle goes back in, the door gets closed. The meal is not surrounding the alcohol. It's not a discussion of how amazing this alcohol is. Because children learn from what we eat. And this is something we don't even think about. Okay, how many people have? You get a great bottle of wine, put it on the table, talk, but we don't even think about it. But you know what? Sometimes you give it some thought, and all of a sudden things start to make sense. The other thing when it comes to alcohol, and this is extremely important, and this is something I say all the time. If you're ever someplace and somebody offers somebody a drink and the person says no, that's where it ends. Period, end of story. For all you know, that other person might be in recovery, and the last thing anybody here wants is to be the cause of somebody to get peer pressure, to be somehow forced into having another drink, which will literally take them right back down to where they were. Gotta be careful with that. Now I will also say something a little bit scary, but it's just the sad truth, and it's funny, when I was in high school, 5 years ago, it was worth a shot. No, different type of shot, but yeah. So it was like, there was maybe like 1 or 2 guys that we knew of that smoked weed, maybe. I don't think I ever dreamt that I would see the day that I would have 14-year-old clients using heroin. I never dreamt of it. Even when I first started getting involved, the ages that we're seeing people using drugs are younger and younger. And when I first got involved in this, about 21 years ago, there was it was mostly boys or men. Now we're about 50-50, in high schools especially. 50% of our clients in high schools are girls, 50% are boys. So a lot of people assume that this is a boys' problem or this is more that. It's not true. I'm sorry? Well, where do they afford it? First of all, it's very cheap, but we'll get to the questions afterwards, but you can, I won't give away the secrets, I'm joking. No, how do they afford it? So first of all, it's not even about affordable. Very often, I'll get to that, very often, you have children that are prescribed medications, whether it's ADHD medications, anti-anxiety medications, prescribed. Now, what happens if those children are taking those medications to school and the parents don't feel comfortable letting the school know that they have a child on medication, so there's no monitoring of it? And now all of a sudden, one student, friends like, listen, can I have your Adderall because I have to cram for a test? And all of a sudden they start sharing pills. Extremely common in high school. And by girls especially, it became the Adderall diet. So now all of a sudden you have people that are being prescribed medication, giving it to their friends. If the parents would tell the school what medications their kids are on, there would be another level of protection. But again, because there's the stigma associated, we can't get to that as well. The other thing is that very often, and this is all in our heads, and I say this joke, I was leaving Yankee Stadium 2 years ago, Pesach time, Chalamayid, we took the whole family, and all of a sudden this guy was panhandling, and he had up a sign, I'm not going to lie to you, I just want to buy beer. So I actually gave the guy 50 cents, because I felt his honesty deserved something. We assume that the addicts is the bum on the street, the same way we assume that the sex offender is the guy in the trench coat that looks odd. But the reality is that's not the case. And we have people from lawyers, doctors, accountants, rabbanim, women prominent in community, makes no difference, everywhere that turn to addiction and fall to addiction. And it's for so many reasons. There is no one reason. First of all, let's be very honest. A lot of teenagers might start because it's fun. It might just be something as simple as that. Okay? It doesn't have to be this crazy cause that got a teenager to use drugs. Now what happens? Somebody starts using drugs. Now let me ask, how many people here have had a headache and taken 2 Tylenols? Why do you take 2? That's what it says on the bottle, right? The bottle says 1, you take 1. Anyone ever have such a big headache, 2 didn't work, they took a 3rd? Right? It happens, right? Drugs is the same way. So somebody takes a drug, whatever it might be, and as they start using it, all of a sudden they build up a tolerance for it. And now that dose no longer works for them. So they got to increase the dose. And increase, and increase, and increase. Now what happens when that person gets sober? Hopefully, Bezrat Hashem. The body works in mysterious ways. The actual chemical toxins that remain in the body leave very quickly. The fighting, the urge lasts longer. So now what happens 7 months later, 6 months later, a person has a bad day, hits another speed bump in the road of life, and decides they need to take another hit, they need to get another fix. What's the person's first reaction? Is to go back to the same dose that got them their last desired high. However, by this point, the body built up a resistance to the toxins, and what happens? And that is actually the #1 cause of overdose deaths for the entire opioid crisis. And in our community as well. I can tell you that most people in our community that have died of overdoses were sober between 6 and 11 months. That's just the numbers, and we do keep track. Sometimes people have medical procedures gone bad, turn to drugs. Sometimes people suffer from trauma, turns to drugs. You never know, whatever the reason is, but by the time they are addicted, they are a chola, they are an ill person. They have an illness, they have a disease, we need to be able to help them. Period, end of story. Then we also have this concept, and this is such a gray area, and I hate bringing it up, but I say it anyway. You know, the fine balancing that we just heard Dr. Perlman speak so beautifully about. Now try to go and bring that balance into the world of addiction. Where are we showing too much love, or are we enabling, or which one of the two is it, and when is there a balance? And the answer is there is no simple answer. For every person it's different. For some person, for one, doing A might be the greatest favor, and for someone else doing the exact same thing can be enabling them and causing them more harm. Seek professional advice when going through these things, if chas v'shalom, and you should never need to, should it ever come up. Okay? The other thing to keep in mind is that addiction today, any type of addiction, does not know the difference between ages, genders, religion. It makes no difference. It's an equal opportunity offender, killer, and destroyer of lives and families. Makes no difference. We need to be cognizant of that. We need to understand it. Okay? I can tell you that, this was an amazing story I get from a very prominent Rosh Hashiva of a very, very prominent institution, reaches out to me and says, I need help. My best student that I had, my best student in the Beit Midrash, this was the person that learns 18 hours a day, has a serious alcohol problem, can you please help me? How did the story get found out? He used to come in every day with a coffee thermos, and he would only drink the coffee himself until one day he tripped. And when it spilled, somebody smelled it, and it was coffee, except more than 50% of the thermos was vodka. And this went on for 5 years, nobody noticed it. Nobody noticed it. So, at the end of the day, this is the reality of some of the world. Now, just for a second, especially since we're dealing with the new age, so I love this when I speak in high schools, I always get the response, vaping, the new drug. So vaping has 2 major categories. One is actual drugs that are being put into the vapes. The other one is nicotine. So by now everybody knows, we've seen all the commercials, all the ads. But I always love it when people say it's healthier than cigarettes. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. If you're a smoker and you're trying to stop smoking and you're using it as smoking cessation, maybe. I don't know. This is something that I let the scientists figure out. But if you never smoked, it's certainly not healthier than cigarettes. That's for sure not. And considering that the nicotine levels in most of the vapes are 10 times the level of what's in a cigarette, and the nicotine is the addictive part, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other things that'll kill you in both of them, something we need to keep in mind as well. And the other part is that today already, a lot of the drugs that are being laced, and we can go into different levels, but let's even say some people are using vaping devices for marijuana. But now already people are starting to mix other substances in with that. Something that has to be kept in mind. What about cigars? Again, definitely not healthy. So people are not supposed to inhale it. So therefore, there's other cancers they get, such as tongue and lip. We can go through other areas, but certainly not.
What age do you speak to children about?
So what age do you speak to children? I'm going to give you the same answer Dr. Perlman said. You need to know your child better than I can. I don't know. My kids, I could tell you, one of my kids, I made a comment about something that he takes medication. I said, did you take your drugs this morning? He goes, drugs, Todd? Those are bad. I'm like, no, I meant your medicine. He goes, that's not drugs. Drugs is what you deal with. That's my kids. But we're very open in my house. Every topic goes. Again, this is something that my wife and I have both been in this field for a number of years, so it's a different area. I say as young as you're...
What about Juul?
Well, that's vaping. Juuls is vaping. That's the same. Juul is just a brand, so I just went through that.
What if your kid asks you, like, oh, did you do drugs when you were a kid?
So I'm going to answer that, but let me first finish here, and then I'll get to that. So the important things to understand is knowing your own child. I will tell you a great story. There was a father that took his child to go meet someone who was an expert at dealing with quote-unquote teens at risk. And this expert turns to the father and says, what is your son's favorite drink? What's his favorite soda? And the father goes, I don't know, maybe Coke, maybe Pepsi. He says, you don't know your child's favorite drink and you're coming to ask me for advice how to parent your child? When you know your child, then come back to me for help. Start by knowing your child. That's step number one. So that's just extremely important. Now the other thing to keep in mind is marijuana is becoming legal in pretty much every state before we turn around. Very important to understand that marijuana's effect on the human brain development, and this is scientifically proven. By the way, you can all go to drugabuse.gov and really get a lot of very valuable information. One of the tools that I always find works with kids is empowering them with scientific data. Instead of being the mean person, learn it with them. It's becoming legal, but they need to understand the fact that till the age of 23, at the very minimal, the human brain does not fully develop. So even if it's legal, it doesn't mean it's good for them. Let's remember that. Exactly. We can compare it to alcohol, which is legal and still kills many, many people. So, at the end of the day, the takeaways before we get to the questions, which we'll get to in a minute, are addiction is a disease and it's a family disease. The only way to address it is to address it as a group. Break the stigma. People should feel comfortable to reach out for help. Seek professional guidance. There's a lot of non-professional guidance out there. Dr. Google is not the answer for how to deal with addiction or any child-raising matters, for that matter. And keep in mind in your home when it comes to alcohol, just keep in mind something we don't even think about. What our children see is what they learn from. We don't want them to learn from that. And at the end of the day, most of what we're dealing with, and I'll end with this part, a two-part ending. How many of us in this room thought when we were teenagers that we were able to pull something over our parents' eyes and we got away with it? Right, okay. No, really? Wow, nobody in this room. I'm impressed. Must be a really tough crowd. The fact is, children always are one step ahead. Our goal is to have good relationships, healthy conversations. I've said this story. This is what I'm going to end with. I know somebody, and this was a style that worked for them, told their child, listen, you're going to go out, you're going to go do something. If you ever get into trouble, no matter what it is, you can always call me, and I promise you, nothing will happen to you. And it happened. This kid got really drunk one night and called his father Said, Daddy, come pick me up. I'm drunk. 15 or 16-year-old boy. His father picked him up, didn't mention a word about where he was, what he did, or what had happened. Not a word. The kid never got drunk again. It didn't even have to. This was the end, because he felt comfortable enough to call him and realize that. The hope is that we don't need to do these speeches anymore. Is Dr. Perlman still here? Okay. And with Siyata Deshmaya, we'll be out of business for good reasons. Now, answer questions. We'll start. I remember you shot something out, and then we'll...
What if your kids ask you if you did drugs when you were younger?
So my policy is always honesty above all, because if your kids find... Okay, sorry. The question was, what if your kids ask you if you ever used any substances or drugs when you were younger? So I said my answer is honesty above all. I might have made mistakes, doesn't mean you should make the same one, because if you lie to your children and they find out, then you lost all trust and respect with them.
What if you sit, like you mentioned, it's Shabbat dinner or a holiday, and you have a typical lachaim, and your child wants to try. So do you, as a parent, you'd rather them try in front of you if they're going to try it, then or you could just be strong about it and say no? What is the best approach when you tell one?
I can't answer that question legally, because that means I would be condoning an underage drinking one way or another. So when I'm not being recorded, we can answer that question. I think you got my answer.
I'm curious about the CBD oil. Does it have the same effect on the brain?
Question about CBD oil, same effect on the brain. The answer is yes, it does have the same effect on the brain. And studies are coming out more and more and showing that. And then I love it when the kids tell me, what do you mean? But I'm using it, it's medical marijuana. I'm like, yeah, but grandma has glaucoma, you don't. So that's great. So now go take your grandfather's blood pressure medication, because why not? But yes, it does have a negative effect as well.
I don't have teenagers, so my question is, how do these kids have access to all of this?
Okay, so I will tell you something amazing. The question was, I don't have teenagers, how do kids have access to this? So I will tell you something amazing. I was sitting in the Waldorf Astoria having dinner with one of my donors. We have an office in Israel as well, so I'm there pretty often. And his granddaughter comes in to join us for dinner, and he looks at me and says, Tzvi, I'm begging you, don't talk about amudim, don't talk about drugs, don't talk about sex abuse, don't talk about anything. My granddaughter is an amazing girl. She's in a top seminary. She's in this great college program. She's pre-med, but she's perfect. So of course, what does that mean I'm going to do? I'm going to start talking. But I got to wait a few minutes. So I waited about 10 minutes, and I turned to her and I said, listen, I'm just curious. I'm getting on the El Al flight at midnight tonight. I'm sitting in coach between, I'm sure, 15 kids. You think you can get me a Klonopin or something, or Ambien that I can sleep, because I'm just completely, I know I'm going to be wiped. Without thinking twice, she picked up her phone. And then she looked at her grandfather and put it back down. And I turned to him and I said, now can I ask her the truth? Within 2 degrees of separation, every teenager you and I know can get access to anything. I can almost guarantee that.